I'm upgrading from my tent into what I think will be a whole new pathway in my camping experience. Join me as I share my new Freedom Camper and why I'm making the move for 2026 on this week's Camping Gear with the Yankee Camper. Tents. Back around 2004, I decided I needed to sell my pickup truck to accommodate 5 of us, plus the dog. A Jeep Grand Cherokee would fit the bill, but it meant I was no longer able to transport the motorcycles. The best solution was to buy a utility trailer. We used this to take the bikes with us on several trips, but as time passed, bringing the motorcycles became less common. In September of 2024, I took a trip to Maine, but had often thought of repurposing the trailer's function for camping. I considered buying a teardrop, but the price put me off. That was fine for someone just starting out without anything, but I didn't need a galley. I already owned most of the equipment. I had considered building a box drop style, but my carpentry skills aren't a strong suit. Don't get me wrong, I could probably make it work, but it would likely take me longer than I wanted to spend on construction, and I'd rather be camping than building. That's when I started looking for a commercial alternative and discovered the Tuska Hitchhiker. This is a basic shell that could be loaded into the back of a pickup truck or on a trailer by just 2 people, as it weighed under 200 pounds. As this channel grew, I came to realize that a tent prevented me from extending my camp season into the late fall, winter, or early spring. I revisited the idea of purchasing a Tuska, now part of the Redneck Blinds Company out of Pennsylvania, and rebranded as Freedom Camper. So, just after Thanksgiving, I saw they were having a Black Friday deal, saving $300, and I decided to move forward. I prepped the trailer by buying new tires and in early December headed to the dealership in Maine to pick up my new unit, a 58 by 89 in gray, the only one they had. It looked lonely sitting in the lot. A quick inspection revealed a couple of scuff marks on the door, but it was soon being loaded onto my waiting trailer. The forklift operator expressed some concerns about the fit, but I'd measured everything before buying it and knew that if it was made to the specifications as described on the website, it'd fit with inches to spare. First, a tape measure was retrieved to check because they didn't believe me. Then, the owner came out to supervise. I'm guessing because he wanted to make sure that it was actually going to leave that day. After a tiny bit of wrangling, the camper slid onto the trailer just like I knew it would. When we stopped to check everything was okay, we discovered that the straps were being cut by the rail on the trailer. We replaced these, ran new ones inside, and headed home. Now it sits under a tarp with over 2 feet of snow on top, but I'm already planning a trip in less than 3 weeks up to New Hampshire to see how it works in the cold. I should have that video up in March. I'm looking forward to the new year using this camper, and I've started thinking about how it'll work in all seasons. I am a little concerned about the inside height being only 4 feet, but that's the interior of a teardrop, and lots of people are camping in those. I've been a tenter for a long time, and I'm not getting rid of my current one. But before I talk about that, let me tell you about tents in general. This segment is about to get intense. As any survivalist knows, you can build a shelter out of pine boughs, and a minimalist can use just a tarp to create a cover to mostly keep out the rain and wind. But that's typically for survival. Many people start out camping with a tent for protection from the elements. I've been tenting my whole life, but I also had a pop-up camper growing up, although I still mostly slept in a tent with my brother, and I had an old Class C motorhome, so I know a thing or two. Did you know that people were constructing tents more than 40,000 years ago out of animal hides and mammoth bones? The Bible references tent living in the Old Testament, and the Plains Indians lived in teepees. Russians and Scandinavians still use a similar structure, called a lavvu, as temporary shelter by reindeer herders. As a matter of fact, tents are the primary shelter for most nomadic people. Yurts have been used in Central Asia for around 3,000 years. So much for glamping being a modern thing. Soldiers have slept in tents since armies started to move about. Alexander the Great is said to have had a Persian-style tent that could hold 100 couches and was supported by gold pillars. During all of the military conflicts that America has participated in, soldiers have slept in tents. The Third Amendment to the Constitution forbids soldiers from staying in privately owned buildings without the owner's consent. In basic terms, if no one lets the military stay in barns or other structures, they have to stay in tents until a barracks can be constructed. Many pictures and photos show encampments with rows of tents to house the soldiers. Even the swamp on MASH was just a tent. My tent is a Eureka Timberline 4-person. It's a freestanding A-frame that can easily be set up by one person. These were introduced in the early 1970s. Prior to that, umbrella tents or pup tents were what most campers used. Growing up, we had a heavy canvas tent in the 1960s, but switched to an umbrella style after my parents bought the pop-up. Most tents of that era typically came with a jumble of poles that had to be fitted together to form the structure. The Timberline uses elastic cord to keep the poles together, allowing for ease of construction, even in low light. I'll show you how it goes together in a moment. Scout organizations adopted these shelters as many young boys and girls spent numerous nights sleeping in the outdoors. Styles have moved on to more modern adaptations using lighter fabrics and designs. Johnson Outdoors stopped making this iconic tent in 2024, when I got mine, discontinued their entire recreational tent segment, and sold off the Eureka military division to focus on their Jet Boil brand, moving from a system of just boiling water to high-end cooking. Personally, I still find this price beyond the needs of most campers, but let me know in the comments if you have one and what you think. I received my current Timberline as a Christmas gift in 2024 after I retired the old one that I'd had for around 40 years in 2022 following a trip to Baxter State Park. Initially, I didn't want to upgrade out of nostalgia and familiarity, but when I heard that they were going away, I figured it would be the last one I ever have. I don't think it'd be around in another 40 years. I feel that with the current technology, almost any tent will work just fine for getting outdoors in the mild weather of the standard camping season. And I'll be keeping my latest Eureka ready for times such as motorcycle camping when I can't bring the Freedom Camper to get outside. Now, you know. Let me show you how easy it is to set up that tent. But first, I hope you're enjoying this video and thank you for watching. But I don't get any compensation for this. However, if you'd like, you could buy me a cup of coffee. I'll put the link in the description down below. Thank you. One of the reasons I've always liked the Timberline
is I can set it up practically blindfolded. After laying out the tent, there's 4 corner poles made up of 4 short sections and a center spanner pole made up of 3 sections, all the same length, and shock corded together to keep them organized. These fit into a plastic junction tube at each end. The bottom of the corner poles fit into rings attached to the tent with a stud that fits into the base of the pole, creating a freestanding A-frame. At the tent's peak of each end is a loop. It doesn't matter which end you start, but I'll begin at the back. You pull the tent up and hang the loop over the junction tube. Next, clip the plastic hooks to the corner poles. Repeat the process on the opposite end. At this point, I'll typically pull the tent square. Next, the rainfly goes over the peak of the spanner pole. There's 2 remaining short poles, each fit into the ends of the spanner pole that extends beyond the junction tube. One goes in the front and the other in the rear, and this allows the rainfly to extend beyond the front door and the rear window. A trick I've learned is that if you have trouble getting the small brass hook into the pole end, use one of the tent stakes crosswise through the hook to give it leverage and pull. I didn't need to do that here. At the corners of the rainfly are small brass hooks on a shock cord loop that pull down to hook on the metal corner loops of the tent. These will help pull the base of the tent taut. Next, connect the plastic clips sewn into the rainfly to the D-rings attached to the wall tent. Pull the shock cord out and stake the ring at the end of the cord into the ground, making sure there's a gap between the tent wall and the underside of the rainfly. This gap is critical to assure that your tent stays dry. The upper part of the tent wall is a thin, breathable material to prevent condensation buildup. Maintaining this gap prevents moisture from wicking back through the thinner upper wall. I've never had an issue as long as this gap was maintained. Finally, stake the corners of the tent and you're all set. Walmart offers a similar A-frame design in a 3-person tent for under $60. It's almost double the weight of a Timberline 4, and the Eureka has a bigger footprint and more interior height. But I think it would be a great starter tent for the price. Let me know if you've used one and what your thoughts are in the comment section. I did a video back at Christmas where I visited a few of the camping suppliers, but I sure miss the days of outdoor outfitters where you could talk to people who actually used the equipment they sold. Here's a few of the stores I used to visit. When I started buying camping equipment, there were outfitters that stocked the items you needed to get outdoors. Most of them featured practicality over gimmick. Sure, there was some extreme stuff, but they were pretty much just backpackers and campers. The two weren't mutually exclusive, but most backpackers were looking to save weight. Campers were looking for conveniences while being outdoors. By far, my favorite place was Hilton's Tent City near the Boston Garden on Friend Street. I used to peruse this location and keep mental tabs on what new items had come in. But my favorite pastime was visiting the upstairs and finding gems amongst the stacks of new old stock. I bought my refillable 1-pound propane cylinder tanks here, which I still have. My last purchase was a Columbia 3-in-1 convertible winter jacket that continues to keep me warm today. In 2017, after 70 years in Boston, they moved across the Charles River to Cambridge, but in the spring of last year, they announced their permanent closure, holding on longer than many of their smaller competitors. One of those businesses was Moore Mountain Sports in Andover, Mass. I only visited here a few times,
but they had a stellar reputation for quality gear with the experience to match. For 45 years, this establishment focused on the equipment that folk were looking for when staying outdoors. But as the owners got older and the internet encroached on their market, they decided to hang up their hiking boots and retire. A third retailer that I used to enjoy was Eastern Mountain Sports out of Wellesley, Mass. Like Moore Mountain, it also started in the 1960s to support climbers. This grew into more than 100 locations around the New England area. I really liked this store, but it changed hands a number of times, causing stores to close in the process. In 2024, the company filed for bankruptcy, and later that year, some of the locations were purchased by Mountain Warehouse, a UK-based retailer of outdoor gear. There's a couple of EMS stores around, and they have an internet presence. But when I checked, their focus was on clothing, including skiing apparel. Their gear supply was limited to sleeping bags, some backpacks, a few kitchen items, and water bottles. No tents, stoves, or lanterns. Maybe because it's the dead of winter, or maybe they're rebuilding inventory. I'll wait and see. Of course, there are still retailers, such as REI, LL Bean, and Cabela's Best Pro Shops, which all have a camping component to their sales. I'm not sure about the expertise available at these shops, but I suspect they'll be helpful. I will say, as a negative, that I've always felt that salespeople at REI have been a bit pretentious, but maybe that's me. I don't think a fat old guy is their target demographic. I did a segment on LL Bean in 2024, but I have to give Kittery Trading Post and Kittery, Maine a shout out. I've always felt welcome, and their camping offerings are second to none. I've been a longtime fan of Campmore out of Paramus, New Jersey, although I've never actually visited. Before the internet, I'd spend hours thumbing their black and white newspaper type catalog. They have a great online presence now, and this is actually through whom I bought my Timberline 4 last year. They actually also offer rentals. Have you ever rented camping equipment? Let me know in the comments how that worked out. Of course, there's always Amazon for online purchases, and many Walmarts carry a decent supply of camping gear in stock. I use both of these to get many supplies, but I think I'll try to include Campmore in my searches as I look for future bits. As I mentioned, after the 2022 season, I felt my old Timberline was worn out, and I started to explore other options. I'd tried sleeping in my SUV, but I was uneasy about not being able to open the rear hatch from the inside. This was about the first time in 45 years that I did not own a tent of any type. By some Yankee ingenuity, I was able to purchase a Napier Sportz Cove at a very discounted price, and decided I would try it out for the 2024 season. I'll give you my thoughts as I walk you through how to set it up next. I felt for a long time that too many people miss out on getting close to nature because it seems financially out of reach. With a tent and some basic equipment, plus a little bit of planning and common sense skills, a weekend away is entirely possible and affordable. Now, you know. The next segment is from my video on Salisbury Beach State Park, which I put up in June of 2024.
The Napier Sports Cove is designed for the smaller or larger SUV. I've got the larger one, and it goes on to the back of the SUV as a tent, and I'm going to set that up now.
When packed, the tent fits in a carrying case only 25 inches long, 6.5 inches wide, and 6.5 inches high. It weighs 8 pounds. The 3-season tent is easy to install by one person and, with practice, can be set up in less than 10 minutes.
There are 2 straps that hold the tent together. And I'll take those out and place those to the side. Set of poles. And these will arch across the back of the tent. The first thing to find is the reinforcement corner. These go up here.
After getting the top of the tent hung across the open tailgate, the lower portion is stretched to fit under the rear bumper. Continue tucking the elastic cord under the rear of the vehicle until the width is entirely under the back of the SUV. Clips attach underneath to the edge of the plastic molding to hold the base of the tent in place. There are adjustable straps on the lower sides of the tent to assure a snug fit. This was the first time I set this tent up in the field, although I did put it up in my driveway when I first received it. With practice, I expect that I'll have these straps connected and tight in a jiffy. Once the tent is connected under the vehicle on both sides, there are additional straps that connect to either the rear wheel wells, or as I did, the rims, to hold the tent against the rear fenders. Pulling all of the straps tight assures no bugs or rain. The top portion is then connected to the roof rails and pulled tight. If your SUV doesn't have roof rails, Napier supplies long web straps that will run the length of the roof and over the windshield to attach the hinges of the hood. Again, pulling these straps tight, either to the roof rails or the long straps, will assure that the weather and insects stay outside your vehicle. There's also a strap and clip that attaches inside the center to the tailgate latch. The Sportz Cove has a small awning that extends over the door of the tent by about 2 feet. This provides a little bit of shade or protection from the rain when entering or exiting. The door itself extends the width of the tent, and dual zippers allow easy access into the rear of the SUV. The tent door also has a mesh screen for airflow and a solid fabric for privacy. The single collapsible pole is run through a tunnel sewn into the outer edge of the canopy. Be careful not to force the pole through, as the metal connectors can get hung up on the fabric of the tunnel. Once the pole has about 2 feet of length extending on both sides, the ends are fitted into pockets found at the lower corners of the awning. Smooth the fabric to assure that the pole is properly set and there are no areas bunched up. Then insert the other end of the pole into the opposite side pocket, creating a hoop. Along the canopy edge are small Velcro strips that loop around the pole and hold the awning out. These help to keep the shape of the hoop. Continue to work around the edge of the awning until all of the Velcro loops have been secured to the pole and the hoop is neat. Next are the guy lines. You may be tempted to skip this step, but I advise against it, as they serve at least 2 purposes. First, they keep the shape of the awning, but more importantly, they protect the canopy from damage in the wind. The tent comes with 2 stakes which are pushed into the ground, and the guy lines are looped around, then pulled taut. Remember, manufacturers don't add stuff to be frivolous, that costs money. The designers put the guy lines on because they felt they were necessary. You should choose to place the ends at an angle that will allow the lines to hold against the wind, but not too far out that may cause a hazard when walking around. Some people choose to tie strips of bright-colored surveyor's tape or wrap pool noodles around the lines to make them more visible. Since it's just me, I simply remember to walk around the guy lines. If the ground is hard or rocky, the stakes may require a little persuasion to go in, and I use a tent mallet or the back of my hatchet for this if necessary. Now the tent is set up. I hope you'll take a moment to give this video a thumbs up. It lets YouTube know that you like the content that I'm putting out. If you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. I put out a video just about every week on camping around New England, cooking in a mess kit, and the gear that I use. Until next time, I hope you'll get outside, and thank you for watching.